elaborate a little bit. We've talked a lot about games, and we've talked a lot about gamification and why games. Um, but maybe I think the most powerful statistic was one that Rob gave yesterday, and it's something I usually show in my workshops as well, which is only 29% of the world's workforce is actually engaged. And what Rob failed to mention is not just that they're disengaged, but they are actively disengaged. So actually, the world's workforce is actively disengaged, almost 30%. And that means that they're not doing productive work, their mind is somewhere else. And that's why I believe games are powerful, because games really do give you that power of engagement. Um, to give you an example, one thing I've been taking on, especially as a facilitator and as a coach, is actually trying to put games into my workshops. Um, One of my recent workshops in Malaysia, for example, I was working with about 20 different nationalities, and I turned the entire 1 week workshop course into a game, where everyone was competing almost like it was Hogwarts in Harry Potter. So each team had their own points. There were small challenges. If one person, for example, showed me integrity, I would give them points for that. And again, I turned it into a game, and there was no real prize. Actually, like, the organizers of that workshop were just like, all right, what can we give them? I'm like, I don't care. In the end, they're going to be engaged anyway. It was really just for the bragging rights of saying we were the best team. Um, and that's what's amazing about games, because that's how we are as human beings. It becomes very, very, very powerful. And I believe that the distinction is really, when you talk about gaming and learning, it's knowing versus doing. Because a lot of us and a lot of workshops, and when we talk about facilitation, everyone tries to teach you theory. Theory makes no difference when it really comes to actual execution. Um, Case in point, how do you lose weight? How do you lose weight? So dieting, so controlling what you eat, dieting, and working out. And some people will say nowadays, sleep. So that's like the third factor. But everyone knows that. Everyone knows what needs to be done to lose weight. Who does it? And that is the distinction. You know, knowing makes no difference. It really is the power of execution. And when you talk about knowing, someone can tell you, don't date this guy, but you won't know until you actually get into that experience and you realize, no, I shouldn't date this person, or I shouldn't be with this person, or I shouldn't have that slice of cake. Um, and I believe in the old adage, experience really is the best teacher, which is why I'm really big about experiential learning. I'm very big about transformative work. Um, and they say this, that if you read it, it's not really gonna stick. If I hear it and see it, maybe. But if you actually go through the process, then it really sticks with you. And that's what we're gonna be doing today. We're going to actually go through the process of making a game. So we're going to spend most of this time, you guys are going to be on your own with your teams and with your table, and you're going to be creating games. But to be able to do that, I need to explain and break down what is a game, at least in its most basic forms. You had a little bit of discussion yesterday on core drives. That's amazing. I'm not going to go that deep, but I'm going to go into the bare bones of what a game is. And the first most important thing for me is games are built on agreements. When I say agreements, another word for that is rules. I just don't like the word rules. Because when you use the word rules, it's like I gave you the rule and you need to follow it, like an obligation. Agreements are something that we both agree on. Does anyone recognize this game? Monopoly. So, hmm? You So this is actually the very, 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 very first version of Monopoly. It was called the Landlord's Game. It was created by a woman. She was a Quaker. Um, and she created the Landlord's Game to teach people about the ills of capitalism and to teach people about predatory landlords. And that's why she created the game, until the Parker brothers stole it. And I share this because with a simple shift of the rules, the entire intention changed. Everyone knows Monopoly now is about just getting money, getting as much property as possible. But the original game had very limited number of houses, and it was supposed to show you that, all right, when you take over all of these houses, the other person goes bankrupt. And that was the intention, to teach people, oh, that's what predatory landlords do. And you would learn that lesson through the game. So look at that. Later, when you're going into and designing your games, think about what are the rules? What are the boundaries? What are the agreements that we have to make this game work? Because the agreements are actually what is going to create the game completely. In the same way, if you look at sports, basketball versus football, how you handle a ball, it's very clear. Rugby, I could elbow you, I could push you. In basketball, that's not the case. There is the rule of the foul. So the rules really create the game. When you're creating a game, it's also important to ask the question, what is the background conversation? When I say what is the background conversation, it's what do you want people to get out of the game? Take, for example, again, Monopoly. In Monopoly, people are originally, at least in the Landlord's Game, the background conversation was to teach something. So if you're looking at your own, and that's why I called this being masters of the universe, if you're looking at your HR department, what is the background conversation? Are you trying to teach a certain value? Are you trying to reinforce a certain attitude or reinforce certain actions? Or are you trying to have them avoid certain actions? And ultimately, the most simple part of a game, and actually the part that you really need to work on, is the push and the pull. It really is just that, push and pull. So when you're talking about push and pull, what needs to be learned? What is the background conversation of what you're doing? And are you going to push it very, very far, meaning you're going to make it very blatant what you're trying to teach, or you're going to make it something a little bit more subtle? What behavior are you rewarding? So again, push and pull. The more rewards you give for certain behavior, then someone's going to actually want to do that action a little bit more. How will you challenge the players? So this is the delicate balance in terms of games. If a game is too easy, people won't want to play it again. If it's too hard, people won't want to play it at all. So again, push and pull. And where will you draw the line? I say draw the line because you have to make decisions in the game, like what I mentioned yesterday about in Upstart, people would want to sabotage, but I would say, all right, I want to promote collaboration, so where do I draw the line? And for today, I want you to really take it on that this is just a day of fun. This is just a class of fun, and just roll with it. You know, to build Upstart, again, it started from here. Me cutting 100 plus different pieces of paper. It says Rome. I probably should say Yerevan wasn't built in a day. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of iteration. So today, don't worry if the game isn't perfect. Today is just have fun, see what you want to teach through the game, and play around with it. Because it is ultimately about play. Okay? So you guys ready for our little challenge? Again, I told you it's less about talking. Today it's more about doing, because that's really what this is going to be about. All right? So the rules are actually very simple. I'm going to give you, or I'm going to put a box over there of different items. So these are different things that you can use to make your games. So this is actually like a small whiteboard. I have markers here. These are actually like little cards that are dry erase as well. These are dice you can actually write on as well. This is not dry erase, so don't write on it. And there's dice and little pieces that you can play around with. So the rule is you can only, as a group, have 10 items at a time. So you're going to make a game out of 10 items. Markers count as one item. This counts as one item. This counts as one item. These are 2 items. Okay? So to make it very clear, those are the rules of the game. And you must create the game that can be instructed and played within 20 minutes. And I'm going to give you about half an hour to play around with all of this. Just have fun with it. And think about the things I talked about. Think about the background conversation. Think about the rules. What behavior do you want to reward? What is the push and pull of the game? And don't overthink it. Okay? And then at the end, we'll come back together and we'll talk about it. Okay? So I'm going to give you guys about 30 minutes. These are the rules of the game. May the odds forever be in your favor. So you guys can go. Get it?
Dollar halen kosmen. Dollar kosmen. Okay.
Aman ne kadar iyi ait. Ինչու՞ ես մեծ արա։
So it's 10 at any given time, so you can return items. Just make sure you have 10, a maximum of 10. So you can go back and forth. Yeah, you can switch, it's up to you. And use the items that I provided, okay?
Կարող ենք լաբերանտի պես մի բան անել, հետո որ միտեղ ավարտվի բանը կարը։ Չգիտեմ ժամանակ կգնանք տնել, որ օրինակ ամեն մեկ խաղցողը 30 սեկունդից պետք է էդի չալենջն է, Այդ սայն չէ
Եկեք գրիմ ժամանակի
Չէ, ընդհանուր ես պրոստը առաջարկում եմ նայել, լավ նայեք
ինչ ենք սովորացի, ինչ այլ խաղեր սովորացնելու, ում համար լինելու, այս դրա նաև կանոններ են սահմանել, այդ միատքով եք որոշում, ինչ են շպատակը։ Ну, երեխեքին, բայց ինչ թեմայի շուրջը։ Իրենք ուզում որ երեխեքը
Իրանք ուշ են հասնում, բայց հաղթանակը տալիս են իրանք ուշ հարցի ապատասխան, հարցին կարող ասում ապատասխանին, որը դարի ծերքով առաջանում, հարցը կարար լինի ինչ-որ համար են քորին նպատակ է լինի,
Nick, you have about 23 minutes left. 23 minutes left. Make sure also that there's one person in your group that can explain the instructions.
Можно вот так. Если бросаешь на 5, то можно двигаться вперед, если 3. Чтобы нужно правую карту делать, чтобы вперед-назад, чтобы дать сюда. Когда ходишь сюда, а как?
Давайте просто, если вы не поделите, иметь маленький рисунок, кого останавливать.
Жребий будем использовать? Каждый в свою очередь бросает жребий. Я получила 4. Что это означает? Если у тебя больше, тогда что?
У нас есть
Բայց ես էլ կարա օգտագործվի, օրինակ ես կարա օգտագործվի մոդերատորի կողմից, ասել հիմա դու փոփաստարկը, հիմա դու փոփաստարկը, որ բանը անես, որպես կազմակերպչական մոդերեյթ անես։ Այս սրանք են, եթե հասնում ես օրինակ կապույտ կամ հակառակը ոնց ասեք, եթե չես հասնում դեղից։
Նա եթե սրան, որ ծնավոր սրան համոզիլ է, այս երկուսը սրամոտ է, սպասային սրակը։
Չէ, երկուսը չէ, նա եթե քո ասած X-ի ու բանի փոխարեն, կարա եթե հասա,
Այս միտքն էի ուզում շարունակել, որ եթե իրար հերթնա, լավ, այս ժամացույցը գնում է, որ ինքը սրան համոզի չէ, ու դու 4 քայլ ես տվել իրան, չէ։
Նա ես առաջարկում ժամացույցը մնա սենց in the middle, ցանկացած հարցի շուրջ իրանք բոլորը ունեն 2 minutes։ Երկուսը իրար հետ, որովհետև եթե 2 minutes դու, բան, դու դրա համար մոդերատոր ես, օրինակ դու, որ այս ստիքով ասես, հիմա դու, հիմա դու։
Հիմա այս երկուսը, եթե մինչև իրար հերթնա, որ
Мы должны понять следующую команду. Больше или, я думаю, может быть, суммарно или суммарно.
Черный или не черный.
Да, и тогда там команда, у которой или больше цифр, там,
Потом второй раунд. Третий раунд. Ну, не знаю, посмотреть сколько.
Umarım bizim tatmayı aslında yeri tanıtmışım. Umarım netice kalır. Için orada
То есть меняемся раундами. Команда бросает, если у нее четная, она забирает. Сейчас у вас как бы раунд четкий, а у них раунд нечеткий. Потом меняемся. Раунд нечеткий.
Давай. А ну у тебя...
Я думаю, ведущий нас определили немножко.
Четный раунд.
Да, я буду как бы...
Модератор.
Да.
Модераторы вас уже определили.
Да, сейчас у нас четкий. Сейчас у нас... Сейчас я решу. Сейчас я бросаю.
About halfway into the 15 minutes.
Давайте, в уме будем считать. Не, подожди.
4. 3, это ничего.
А, у нас не было. Уже ничего. Ничего не все. 6. Четная берете.
Сейчас меняемся.
Меняем? У нас нечетная.
Да, то есть нужно так менять, чтобы не забывать, чтобы...
У нас ничего.
Сейчас нечетная.
Կամ կարագ
Սատկած պատուն փորձում է, չգիտեմ։ Հա, այդ են։ Տերը փորձում է սատկած պատմին ուշքի բերել, ինչ որ էսենց։
Հա։ Բայց այդ էքսոնը в принципе կարելի։
Մեկ է ոտամի բայ։
Հա։
Հեսա բոնուսին կհասնենք։ Փաստորեն էքշնները գրված են ումստեղ, հենց մանիթորինել այն քաշում։ Սրանք կատարվում գույներով են դեր։
Հա, կատեգորիաները։
Եվ Dream-ը ստեղ
Dream-ը բայց այն բանալի, բայց այն բանալի Dream-ը չէ, տիպի երազել է։
Իմաստակա մտածել, որ վերջին կետը սա է, հա, то есть մարդիկ հաղթում են, եթե բոլորով գնացել հաղթում են այստեղ, այս կետի,
Արի ֆիլմի տեղ, քանի հոգի մարդ կա։
Այստեղ գրենք 5 հոգին, որ պետք է լինեն այստեղ։ Ու կարող լինի, եկեք որոշենք քանի հատ օծ ու քանի հատ բան։
Քրթուրից պետք է լինի։
Օծ դնենք սեր, տիպա того, что
Կարանք օծը նկարենք։ Չէ, գիտի ինչ, այսի բորդի վրա շատ կարող են նրանք օծելու թռչուններ։ Եկեք այս հայտնիները օգտագործենք մարդկանց համար, ոնց որ տիպա իրանք ստեղ կհավաքվեն։ Այդ մարդիկ էլ նկարենք օծին։
Նա վիզուալներ
Ու երեք եղա, ոքի ես կանաչ առաջինը, մեկ երկու երեք։ Հա, այս ուրեմն Գալը նկարեն։ Հա, եկեք որոշենք քանի հատ օծ, քանի թռչուն ես
երեք հատ չէ, 5 հատ օծ, 2 հատ քրթուր։
Հա, թռչունները թող շատ լինեն, բայց թռչունները երևի
Դրանից համաձայնես, բայց արի որ ես տեսանկյունից նայ։ Դրանով էլ քեզ դնում է կոմֆորտ զոնից հանում է, դնում է հենց զոնի
Okay, դուք երկուսով աղթեք նրան։
Ամբողջ աշխարհը ժամանակ առ ժամանակ քննարկում
է շատ մորել է։ Շատ մորել է։
Եթե նպատակը
Մենք ինչ ենք ողնի սկավով մարդկանց Եթե ուզում եք սովորեցնել, որ պետք է մուսերին մարդներ, դա պետք է սարժեն խմբային խաղացին, ենք 4-ով պետք է նպատակին։
Last.
Richard, ready? We can find out. Play on the roles of the game.
There's a next step. We'll start in about 6 minutes. Yeah, you're good. Yeah. Well, we're not a minus, not a minus.
But we have a very simple game.
Don't worry. Just make sure you can explain it to other people. That's the next thing.
Richard, was it 20 minutes or 40 minutes?
The fact is, to make the game, it must be playable in 20 minutes.
So we have to play.
We will.
Okay.
5 minutes, and we're going to move to the next step. Make sure that you can explain your instructions. That is usually the hardest part, explaining the instructions.
It's going to be the hardest part to explain.
Ямар եմ ասում, նախորդ մարդը
մի հատ չգցեցիր, դու մի հատ կյանքը փորձել ես, մի հատ որ կյանքը չփորձել, դա երկու կյանք եք ունենալու, հա, եթե չգցեցիր, մենք հավանականորեն ճիշտ արժանացել։ Ես մի կյանքը փորձել եմ, դեռ exclude-ին ավելի հավանական քիչ արել, բայց իր կյանքը մի քիչ արել։
Last 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Alright, is everyone good? Everyone good? Good? In the back? Good? Good. Alright, great. So if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. Alright, so the next step is we're actually going to play. So how we're going to do that is I want these 2 tables to switch. And make sure that you have a representative who can explain the game. So the representative can stay in the table, and then everyone else moves. For these 3, because we're an odd number, just move clockwise. So this table will go here, this table will go here, okay? So, play. I'm gonna give you guys about 15, 20 minutes to play the game, experience it, and then we'll talk about it after, okay? So just make sure you have 1 representative, don't just leave your game, because no one will know how to play it. Yeah, this way, clockwise. about 25 minutes. Make sure that you actually play the game. Make sure you play. Play the game. Don't just explain it. Play it.
We are in the play. I do the action.
Microfono.
Նորեն կգեկա այստեղ։ Չէ, այստեղից պիտի չէ։ Չէ, այստեղից 1, 2, 3, 4, 5։
We'll play for about 5 more minutes. We'll play for 5 more minutes.
Հասկանալի է վերջ ով է ֆիդբեք տալու խաղացողների, որոնք դուք պատրաստում եք negotiations եք սովորացնում, սովորաբար տրեյներ սպայի մեջ ասում են այս նվանը շատ դարձի, որ դու իրա հակա այդ առաջարկող տագործեցի և կոնտրարգումենտ տվեցի, ինչ-որ մեկը պետք է վերջում ռեփ-ապ անի, որտև անգամ բիզնես քեյսերում կամ սիմուլյացիա որտեղից ամենավերջում քեզ հետ նստում են ու ասում են ինչներ, չեն ասում ճիշտ ու խավեր, այլ պրոցեսի վերաբերյալ են խոսում։ Շատ լավ է։ Մեկ հիմա պետք է փորձել, որ այս մեկը հասնի։ Այո։
1, 2, 3
Okay. I think we've played. Let's come back here. How was that like for you? What insights did you get? Yeah?
Yes, because I was the person who was explaining the game in our team, so the main insight for the game maker is that you need to really play the game, before you.
If everyone could listen, I know it gets overwhelming with the little toys.
Yes. Yeah, the main insight is that before actually presenting the game to other players, you need to play it for yourself for many times, because with every game you play, you have the bugs coming out from the rules that you have set, and then to kind of update your rules so that when the real players are coming, you have all the scenarios, all the possible scenarios that are coming along while playing. And this is critical. I want to highlight this. A lot of the times, and that's why I said Yerevan wasn't built in a day. To be able to explain a game, or even the mechanics, and you can look as a game as a project. Yes. You can look at it as a project, or even incorporating some of these elements into your work or into your engagement style. It really means that you need to get immersed and you need to do it yourself. There is no theory in this. It is execution. You can think that you have the rules in your head, but you have to just keep on doing it, doing it, and iterating and changing it and growing from it. And And the questions that are people asking while you are explaining the rules, those are the questions that actually should have been foreseen while you will be playing before that. And also kind of all the questions, what if? Like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Then what is the rule?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will need to kind of come up with a rule on the spot.
And you can theorize all you want. And this is to take this back into your workplace. Yes, you can make a great plan, but until you actually implement gamification, you will never understand what it really means. So that means you need to take action. And it really is that iterative process. When we did Upstart, 3 years of testing, and I'm still changing the game. 3 years. I have run games with over 2,000 people, personally. And that's how serious we took testing and modification. Because I'm very serious about learning outcomes. Okay, any other insights? Insights, how was it like for you? Good? Gohar?
I really like the game that was created here. Why? Because you can easily test the knowledge with this game. I mean, testing is always stressful, you know, when you're writing down. And besides that, you can learn a lot. When you're going through the test, usually you fail, and then you wait until the result comes, etc. And on the spot, you learn whatever you've failed, and it's really impressive that they could invent such a good game. Maybe I will use it in my
So the application really, it's not just an engagement, but it can also be in testing. Think of it from a human resource perspective. You could incorporate elements of games on the onboarding process, on the testing process. And so if you notice here, I was actually playing a game with you guys. This was a game. This was all a game. I can see, and from a human resource perspective, I can see personalities. I can see who disengages. I can see who's actually taking lead, taking control over a situation, versus a theoretical resume. So that's one of the things I do with Upstart, actually. With Upstart, before I have anyone join my team, I have them play so I can see how they think and how they act. Because it's a simulation. And with games, what's great about it is it's hard for them to fake who they are, because their natural way will show up. Did you notice there were only 2 markers? Yes. It was very intentional on my part. So again, designing the rules of the game is very, very powerful. Push and pull. I could have put 5 markers. But would you have walked to another table if I didn't? No. You wouldn't have had a conversation with other people. So when you're designing a project or you're trying to put gamification into your elements, it's really in the details. Really looking in the details. And really being able to create those rules that force that push and pull behavior. Another thing that I usually say is constraint breeds creativity, or creativity comes from constraint. I've done this activity before where there was no limitation to the number of items. And my experience of doing that, no one knows where to start. They have all of this, they take all of the items to the table, and they just play. And then they only use like 3. It's from a movie, I remember. It's like playing a piano with an infinite number of keys. It's hard to play music on a piano with an infinite number of keys, because you wouldn't know where it starts, you wouldn't know what song you could create, because the possibilities are too limitless. And actually, there have been research studies that they notice that kids are more creative when they're given boundaries. And I think, again, we're all just kids who grew up. Boundaries are good. Constraint is good. To compare that,
this is a question I like to ask, and it's a question you have in mind when you're putting game elements into your projects, into your processes. How big is your table? How big is your table? And I mean that not just here, but how big is your table? It's easy now because you have a big table. Now imagine if I asked you to make a game on this. If I asked you to make a game on top of the chair. How would that change the rules? How would that change everything? If you notice, I didn't tell you that you couldn't make the whole room your table. You could have actually created a game that was the size of this room. And again, it's the automatics. It's the automatics. And if you create intentional design and you really look at how big your table is, you can take that into your companies as well. What are the constraints? What are the resources? How big is your table? Would it make sense to put gamification through IT if you don't even have an IT team? No. Right? So what items do you have? What constraints do you have? How big is your table? If you know how big your table is and you know what are the resources in the game that you need to play, then you have a better chance. You could, and as you can see, you can actually create games. Everyone here is now a game designer. Okay? Any questions before we end?
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You told that there should be a story or narrative behind. What are the rules actually to how to conceptualize this? How big it should be? How small it should be?
That's really up to you. It could be an open-ended story. It could be a continuing story. It could be one that lasts 5 minutes.
No, I mean the purpose.
The purpose.
The size of the purpose that you can solve with the game. Let's say so.
It's
I mean,
ultimately it's
small,
up. Ultimately, it's up to you. I would say ultimately.
What are the criteria? Yes. Are there any rules or criteria for?
I think it's push and pull. So this is something that has showed up for Upstart as well. I had to make clear decisions about, do I make this game more fun, or do I look at the learning outcomes more? So there were certain decisions I had to make where I was like, all right, again, asking why. Why did I create this game? Was it so that people could just have a good time, or did I want to teach someone something? So I made it intentionally a learning item. Does that lower or make my market smaller? Yes, significantly. I could have made a game that was casual and everyone could have fun. But again, I'm a teacher at heart. So I said that is what is important to me. And when you're designing in your processes, your projects, that's something to keep in mind. Why am I doing this in the first place? And some of the speakers yesterday hit the nail on the head. Really, why, not what? There are a lot of great whats. There's a lot of great things that you can put, but you need to ask, why am I doing it? And then figure out how that connects. What are the different elements that you could create? It could be as simple as a piece of paper on a wall or a whiteboard that has checks and gives points for behavior or for completed actions. It could be as simple as a bell that everyone rings inside every time a sale is made. That's gamification. Any other questions? Yeah.
Regardless of our not regardless of, depending on the level of our consciousness. Has it happened? I just finished. Has it happened?
If you're talking about me going into organizations and really looking at toxic environments, and yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd say that's like the idea of putting cards on the table. And that's why I love games specifically, because people put their walls down. it becomes a touch point where people's walls go down, and then you can have a serious conversation after, versus trying to confront it very directly. And especially with Asian countries, we don't like direct, direct, yeah. In Southeast Asia especially.
Will we have a chance to talk about it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my question is also following this discussion is that sometimes when you go to the company and you want to fix something with the game, what's your experience? Are you upfront telling what is the game about and what are we going to play about, and that then we are going to have a debriefing, or usually you go and then you play and you don't disclose what is the aim of the game, and then you discuss it or debrief that?
It depends, case to case. A lot of the times I don't disclose. The main reason is if I say something, I trigger something already. So what I do usually, so for example, this activity, I've done this to teach core values of an organization. This very activity, I've modified it so that you can do this and show core values and have people experience core values of an organization using games. And I intentionally make the rules a little bit more ambiguous so that it's open to interpretation and how it shows up. And then if you're talking about, for example, integrity, and then I say 10 items, you have 15 items on your table. And you're supposed to create a game about integrity, but you have 15 items on your table. So I could point it out during the game, but would it be a coaching moment? No. So a lot of the times that's what I do. I intentionally withhold, wait until I have the opportunity to have a coaching moment.
And then what are the risks when you don't disclose this information before?
So usually we didn't do it today, but usually in my workshops, I start with agreements. I usually start with agreements. I start with a list. It's rules essentially, but for me, everyone before we start, they agree to it. And one of those items is I agree to be coachable. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was ambiguity.
Mm-hmm.
What was this coaching? Said we have only two. I mean, I didn't get the point.
No, the only two markers, the idea was, again for me, to have you intentionally walk and cooperate with other teams.
Yeah, we understood.
Yeah.
The issue is that I thought that it was an example when we hold some rules,
Mm-hmm.
disclose them at a certain point,
Mm-hmm.
not at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
So you think it works?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Was talking about core value integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And on purpose, you've said something and you've done the other.
Yeah.
Yes, which not is integrity.
The same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it would teach people and it would
Mm-hmm.
create a coaching moment.
Yeah. So a lot of the times it really depends. Again, situation to situation. I can't really say in this situation it will be appropriate, in this situation it will be different. Again, it's theory. Usually when I'm there, I'll know and I'll read it. And that's a big part of it, being able to read the room. Okay, I think we're just done. Yeah? So please do return the items to the box because I need them for the next master classes. And I have one last favor, if we could take a picture together. Yeah. So I'm going to give Miles. Thank you. And Gohar. Yeah.
Where do you want us to make the photo?
We can face this way, maybe go here. Yeah. Everyone come here, then we'll take a picture.
I'm not blocking anyone, right?
Which one, eh?